It's 4:20 somewhere, and right now that somewhere is right here. So hello and welcome to the Cannabis Show. I'm producer Vince, and here's your host, Ricardo Baca.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks for that, man. And to everybody joining us today, welcome to the Cannabist Show, where we talk about all things weed.
That's all things.
And that's the serious marijuana news and the not always serious stories as well. In fact, if you pop onto the site right now, and that is thecannabist.co, you can read stories about a newly organized Passover Seder that brings cannabis into the mix.
L'chaim.
About another couple of recalls of marijuana in Colorado.
But they're changing why they do it.
And about a new AP poll that says 61% of Americans support legal cannabis.
Yep. That's all I'm saying about that.
Well, you know, producer Vince is in the house. Dude, how have you been?
You know what, man? Every day is just another fun day for me. It's another day in paradise, a mile high, and I'm loving it. How have you been recently, Ricardo?
Did you just say another day in Vince? Oh, my gosh.
Last week you took living the dream away from me, so I figured I'd try to sneak the another day in paradise back in this week.
Our longtime faithful viewers know that I've banned Vince from saying certain things, and the list keeps growing. But you know, Vince, thank you for asking. I'm good. Gorgeous week. I love Colorado in the springtime. So thankful that this is where we are at and where we're going. So Vince, it's time for the week in weed. Are you ready for this?
Now that I've dug myself out from the blizzard snow of last week's of weed, I'm ready for this week. Let's do it, dude.
Okay. We are starting this week in weed in the not too distant past. This month's cover story in Harper's tells an outright dastardly story on the backroom conversations that took place in the 1960s between then presidential candidate Richard Nixon and his staff.
And this is so messed up. And it turns out those seemingly crazy legalization advocates who have been screaming from the rooftops about the war on drugs being a creation of the federal government to suppress minorities, well, turns out they weren't really that far off.
Oh man, you know, it turns out Nixon and his administration invented the war on drugs to vilify and unjustly punish African Americans and hippies who were against the war. And if that sounds like some baseless conspiracy theory, here is the money quote. And it comes from journalist Dan Baum in 1994. He tracked down Nixon's domestic policy advisor, John Ehrlichman, who told him...
And prepare yourself, because this is the messed up part.
It is messed up. So this is Ehrlichman. This is the same guy, one of them who went to jail for, went to prison for Watergate. He said, quote, "You want to know what this was all really about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies. The anti-war left and the black people. And understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." End quote.
Of course they did. It's downright evil, especially when you think about how many lives were negatively and still are negatively affected by the direction that they set us on.
You know, it's hard to believe, and of course, our country's leaders have lied to us before, but this just seems beyond the pale. This really is evil, and it hurts. The first time I read that, I just had to read it again, and then I had to read it out loud to my wife. Yeah, you know, unfortunately, it doesn't lead naturally into our next Week in Weed item, and this story picks up about 50 years after those Nixon conversations left off. This story comes with a group of 22 medical experts convened by Johns Hopkins University and The Lancet, and they're calling for the decriminalization of all nonviolent drug use and possession.
And they're citing a growing scientific consensus on the failures of the global war on drugs. They're encouraging countries and United States to move, quote, gradually toward regulated drug markets and apply the scientific method to their assessments.
Yeah, so Nixon helped start the drug war, and now these medical experts are trying to end it. And their timing, the timing of their report is important because it comes before a special UN General Assembly session on drugs to be held in April, and that's where the world's countries will reevaluate the past half-century of drug policy.
And many medical experts hope they will chart a course that is centered on public health going forwards.
You know, the Hopkins Lancet experts said the prohibitionist anti-drug policies of the past 50 years, quote, directly and indirectly contribute to lethal violence, disease, discrimination, forced displacement, injustice, and the undermining of people's right to health, end quote.
Wow. Again, that's all I'm saying, man. Just wow.
I get it. Lastly, in the week in weed events, we come home to Colorado,
Woo!
where some state legislators and anti-drug groups have proposed 2 statewide measures that would limit the amount of THC in marijuana and its many products at 16%.
16%. And this is super interesting, especially because the average THC potency for cannabis flower and marijuana concentrates is already higher, if not much higher, than 16%.
True story. The average bud in Colorado tests at 17.1% THC. The average extract tests at 62.1% THC, some much higher. But before we talk any more about these proposals, I want to bring out our first guest, who is our very own concentrates columnist at the Cannabist Show. So it is my pleasure to welcome back to the show, Prichard. Rye, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. I like your shirt, man.
Thanks.
What's going on here? Just a normal day for a neon California Republic shirt?
Yeah, you know, like to keep it bright and fresh.
He really wanted to match your chair.
Oh, no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
We might have to
Blending in
switch
here.
sides.
Yeah, good thing there's not a green screen behind me, right?
I know, you'd just be floating.
Yeah.
All right, first we have to ask. I don't know if I've ever asked you this question. Sativa or indica?
I'm more of a sativa guy if I had to pick. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. No, I mean, I really like hazes. I really like equatorial sativas, kind of weird stuff. A little bit racy. I like that kind of thing.
Ah, I like it. All right, let's pick up on this THC limit. I know you and I spoke yesterday, emailed, texted all day. Some in Colorado are proposing a THC limit on all cannabis products, that we're talking 15, 16% max. You've worked in the industry for years, so tell us from your perspective, especially generally speaking, what could this mean for legal marijuana in Colorado?
I mean, hopefully nothing. Hopefully it goes nowhere. But if it did go through, I mean, it would dramatically change the landscape because, as you mentioned earlier, most of the products are higher than that. Most modern cannabis has been bred specifically to be higher than 15% THC. So to me, it feels like it would be a massive step backwards in terms of the plant and the product. Yeah, I don't really understand it.
And a step backwards because, I mean, you talk about breeding for potency. Is it a step? Would it be a step backwards because so many strides have been made? Is that necessarily better pot?
I mean, it's more. I don't even know how the industry can go backwards. I don't even know how this would be a workable thing because there's, if you look at the numbers, there's probably only 10 or 20% of strains that could even test that low, and normally things that test that low are because they're grown really poorly, or a variety of negative factors that would cause something to test that low. It's just not very common. So I think about a 15% THC product, and to me that says a poor product.
Oh, interesting. Okay, like maybe it wasn't grown properly or something.
Yeah, for the majority of things, if they're a THC dominant cannabinoid profile, they should be higher than 15%. Generally, if it's a CBD product, that's a whole different argument.
Sure.
Which maybe that's part of what this is about.
Well, I mean, you are our resident concentrates columnist, so let's talk about what this could mean for concentrates. I mean, the average extract in Colorado tests higher than 60%, many more than 70, 80%, yeah. Right? So do you think that the people behind these initiatives are trying to kill concentrates in Colorado?
I mean, I think that's a pretty fair guess. Obviously the groups are anti-cannabis groups primarily that are proposing it. So I think that it's a very thinly veiled attempt at doing that. I mean, it would effectively eliminate every product on the market right now, except for a very tiny minority.
Every concentrated product.
Yeah, certainly every concentrated product. I mean, I think about how to make a 15% concentrate, and you would have to dilute it, because the whole point of concentrating something is that you're increasing the levels of the things that were in the first thing. So it's very I don't even know how you would do that. You would have to dilute it or something, which as a consumer would scares the crap out of me. So.
I know. Well, let's talk about that, because you and I did talk about it yesterday, and did you say something along the lines of even if it was 4% THC flower, that could still very well end up testing higher than 15%?
100%.
As a concentrate.
Yeah, I mean, I literally don't know what you would have to, what kind of starting material you would have to have in order to end up with a concentrate that tests 15%. Certainly not a raw concentrate. Like I said, you would pretty much have to dilute it.
And you're also super plugged in the industry. I'm curious, what are you hearing people saying about this proposal? I guess I just heard about it on Friday very loosely, and I wasn't quite sure where it was, and then heard more. I saw a copy of the proposed bill and the ballot initiative on Monday, and that's when we got the story up. But what is the industry saying about these proposals?
I mean, I think the industry is pretty much laughing at it. I think the industry pretty much thinks that this is clearly written by people who don't understand the ins and outs of how things work. They don't understand, for example, that the majority of products are higher than that, or maybe they do, and if they do, then it's, like I said, it's just a very obvious attempt at banning concentrates or banning the majority of products and making it a very narrow market that's not appealing to people. So yeah,
crazy times we're living in, right, Prichard?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, your last column for the Cannabist, you laid out 5 dabbing essentials. We're switching gears here a little bit, but I loved this column because it was like a how-to. It was a beginner's guide, and this really is one of the fastest growing categories within legal cannabis. So you laid out, the things people need to get in if they want to try, experimenting with wax shatter, rosin, live resin, whatever you're vaporizing these days, right? And that included the rig, nail, torch. So I want you to walk us through these purchases. If you were starting anew, what would you buy first? What would you buy last? What would you spend the most money on? What might you skimp on?
I think probably the most important thing is actually probably your dabbing surface. So you don't want to skimp on a nail. You don't want to go with uncertified titanium. You don't want to go with low-grade quartz. Any of those things can have chemicals in them that will off-gas under high temperatures. And so that is probably the one that I would take the most concern of, just because it's more of a health concern than anything. Sure. Beyond that, the piece of glass, the rig that you're using, I mean, it's largely based on preference. So, I personally use something that most people in the community would laugh at. It's a little, like $50 piece of crap, but it does the job, and it gets the flavor that I like, and I don't feel that I need anything more extravagant than that. So, I would say, you definitely need a torch because you need to heat the thing.
Right, unless you're going full-on electronic, right?
Yeah. So, but that's kind of the next step. So I think most people kind of walking into it probably wouldn't jump right to the e-nail.
Okay, sure. Because that's an investment, or
it's just a lot of money.
Okay.
I mean, you have to have the rig, and then you have to have the attachment, then the actual e-nail, and so you're looking at $400 or $500 by the time you get done with all that stuff. So, if you're looking to dab something for $100 or $150, you can get a cheaper, a fairly cheap rig at any head shop in town. You can get a quality nail for $50-$60 at any shop in town. And a torch for about $30, so that's probably what you need, and then you need some kind of a dabber, but those are $10-$15. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We hadn't talked about this beforehand, but I'm going to throw another question out to you, because having access to the right Prichard, I have to take advantage of it. I sat next to some nice folks at a dinner a couple months ago, and we were talking about dabbing. I told them I've never dabbed. I'm mildly curious, but I'm just also like respecting my own abilities, my own I don't want to go too far, but these folks were telling me that the point of dabbing isn't to get super messed up. That the point of dabbing is really to extract different flavor profiles and attain a similar high that you might if you were smoking a bowl, eating an edible. Is that true?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I talked about this once before on the show, but I mean, really, when you're smoking a joint, you're consuming about the same amount of cannabinoids as you're getting in a dab.
You talked about that part, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, in terms of the flavor side, I mean, that's why I dab. That's why I prefer concentrate to flower. It's a better flavor experience. It's a deeper experience. You know, you're not only concentrating the cannabinoids in there, but you're concentrating the terpenes. So instead of something that's 1 or 2% terpenes, you can get it, you know, where it's 10%, and you have a much higher, you know, level of flavor, and the differentiation of the strains is much greater in concentrates as well, I think.
Sure.
I think, you know, by the time you get halfway through a joint, a lot of weed tastes the same, but a concentrate is different every time, and it's always fresh. And that's the appeal of dabbing, I think, personally.
I could see that. Okay. Huh. I think that'll surprise a lot of people. You know, I think a lot of people associate dabbing getting super messed up, but that's not necessarily the case.
No, I mean, especially for somebody who's a regular concentrate user, you kind of just are at the same level. If you're a regular flower smoker, if you're an edible user, whatever, you just kind of reach a level at a certain point. You know, frankly, your cannabinoid receptors get saturated. You can't really get much higher at a certain point. So, so I think that's you know, the focus about how strong concentrates are is kind of misguided. I think it's the reason that people enjoy concentrates is so many other reasons.
Right. We did have that conversation last time you were on about wax being the crack cocaine of marijuana, which I know you're a total fan of. That.
Yeah, of course. I love that old analogy.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. We're going to talk here a little bit more in just a few minutes.
Absolutely.
Now, on to our next segment. I want to throw to our very own Doctor of Dank, and his name is Professor Pat, for this week's entry in the new Cannabist lexicon.
Trichome. Holding the majority of the cannabinoid content in the plant, the trichomes are crystalline structures which coat the plant's bract and leaf surfaces. Looking much like a mushroom when magnified, the head contains the majority of the cannabinoid content and essential oils, but the stalk also has some value. To hear that in a sentence, the trichome heads on this sour D are huge. I can't wait to see what the high is like.
Thank you for that, Professor Pat. And little known fact, the new Cannabis lexicon was written by Prichard and Jake Brown, both of our pot critics. So it is time for our next guest. And he is one of the most powerful men in Colorado cannabis. He owns a pot shop, sure, but he's also the CEO of OpenVape, which is the vape pen company that has licensing agreements in 9 U.S. states and Jamaica. It's my pleasure to welcome Ralph Morgan to the Cannabist Show. Hey, Ralph. Hello. Pleasure seeing you.
Pleasure. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. It was a pleasure meeting you at the hearing the other day. We do start off every conversation on this show, indica or sativa.
Wow, definitely indica.
Oh, indica.
Yeah, yes.
So I'm guessing you have a normally pretty racy mind. Then, if you prefer.
I do. So I enjoy it helping me to calm down and help sleep.
Ah, good for you. Good for you. I'm surprised at the number of indica, people who prefer indica on the show. I mean, it's still a very, very significant lean toward sativa, but there's a good healthy representation, maybe 25%.
Wow. All right.
Ralph, I do want to talk about, as I said in your intro, OpenVape's gotten so huge in the last couple of years.
It has. It's been an exciting ride.
Your products are now available in more than 1,100 dispensaries, 9 states, Jamaica. Your biography calls OpenVape the world's largest cannabis brand, which I don't know many who could compete if they're being sold in that many states and territories, but you started this company only 4 years ago, so I'm curious how you grew so big so fast.
So I started in this industry a couple years prior. So in 2012, several successful entrepreneurs already in the space came together to start a vaporizer company that satisfied the unmet demand on the market, which was a product that was safe, that was consistent, reliable, and something that was a good value to consumers. If there was an issue, there was a return policy that spoke well to that. So that was the birth of OpenVape.
Just kind of bringing that overarching corporate responsibility to cannabis at the time?
That's right. There was this huge unspoken demand and need on the market for a responsible product, something that was backed up by a company like any responsible company would. And this industry is very avant-garde, as you know. It's always dynamic and changing. It was really fun to be able to pick something that seemed so obvious and satisfy that. The CO2 extraction was very key to our success as well. It's become something of a staple in the industry for safe and consistent concentrate creation, and that was definitely part of our mix and served us well.
And convenience too. I mean, convenience is a part of this conversation, right? You pull your OpenVape or any of those standard style pens out of your pocket and you don't have to press a button.
That's right.
You probably don't have to charge it. It's charged from the previous week or two. So you guys were one of the first people to really blow this out, and now there are many people who have followed in those footsteps. But do you think the convenience part plays a role in this conversation too?
It absolutely does. We've converted a lot of folks, dispensary owners included, that were staunch flower consumers, but the convenience just is hard to overcome, and so they'll have that as a backup or as something to use as a maintenance dose throughout the day, even if they're huge flower advocates.
Well, I have a story to tell you, and I've never told this story to anybody.
All right.
But it involves your product, and I think you'll get a kick out of it. But in 2014, when I went on The View, I was backstage, and you know, you're back there, and it's a maze, and there's like Barbara Walters walking by, and Jay Moore was a guest host that day, and of course Whoopi and Jenny McCarthy and whoever else was on the show at that time. But beforehand, one of the producers came in and said, "Hey, Whoopi wants to come in and say hello. You mind if she comes in?" I was like, "No, I don't mind. I'm in here alone. So please, somebody come talk to me because I'm nervous going on the show." And she came in and she just started talking to me about Colorado marijuana, and everything she was talking about had been on the Cannabist in the last 2 weeks. We had just started, but it was very clear, like, she came to the site, she stayed on the site, she read it over the course of a couple weeks, and eventually paid me a very nice compliment and said, "I'm glad you're here, let's do this is going to be fun. Are you nervous?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Do you need a hit?" And she pulls an OpenVape out of her purse, and I was like,
her little sippy.
Wow. It was her little sippy that she ended up writing for in a column about the cannabis. So I looked at it and I was like, wow, I know this brand. In fact, they're based out of Denver, and they have licensing agreements in other states. And she goes, yeah, totally. And I was like, "But Whoopi, I know they don't sell this in New York or New Jersey, which is where you're at." And she's like, "Let's not worry about that. Do you want any or not?" And I was like, "No," because I'm going on national television, and the worst thing I could do right now would be to get high. But it was an OpenVape. And you guys do have celebrity fans. I know I talked with some of your colleagues. Andy Cohen has his own Andy branded batteries that he loves.
Yeah, he's a big fan. Susan Sarandon came out and visited us, and I think one of the reasons why celebrities aren't afraid to approach us is because we try our best to handle it with discretion. So we're not going to blast their pictures and things on social media. We try to respect their time, their space, their persona as well.
You let them blast it out on social media. I know Andy was psyched about doing that. You mentioned CO2 extraction. Let's talk about supercritical CO2 extraction, which is, you know, your guys' method of choice. And why do you prefer that method of extracting THC from plant material?
Well, it all started when I was behind the counter of a dispensary in 2009, and people were requesting concentrates, and there was nothing on the market that we could, with a straight face, recommend to people that was safe. So we started exploring options, and supercritical CO2 extraction was something that the food and flavor industry popularized in the early 90s as a safe and organic way to extract botanicals and to also decaffeinate tea and coffee. So with that, we explored that as an option to make concentrates with cannabis, and it worked out well. It was we were the only company that we knew of at the time that was considering that and invested in that. And today, I think it's a staple for safe concentrate manufacturing.
Oh, fascinating. And have you guys been supercritical since 2012, since the creation of OpenVape, or more recently?
Even earlier than 2012. So cool. Organolabs, which is the MIP or the facility that we do the concentrate manufacturing at, we started that in 2010, and with the supercritical CO2 extraction.
Oh, cool. Now, sometimes when you're making these products, you take that concentrated THC oil, you've supercritically extracted from the plant material, and you mix it with PEG or polyethylene glycol.
That's right.
And I'm just curious why that's your preferred mixing agent.
Thanks for asking the question. It's not our preferred method. In fact, most of our product is in a reserve cartridge, which is pure cannabis, and we have a new product coming out next week, which is called Craft Reserve, which spends a lot of time being sensitive to the volatiles, the terpenes, of course, but also the flavonoids, the esters and alcohols that give it that profile that mix with the cannabinoids to give it the personality of each strain. When we do mix, we do use polyethylene glycol, and the reason we chose that over other options, VG, which is vegetable glycerin, or PG, that the e-cigarette industry has popularized, is because there is more studies, more pharmaceutical studies that use polyethylene glycol as an inhalant. So with that, we have the confidence to use that in our product that does include an excipient, and so therefore we use PEG.
And so let's talk about these new products then.
Okay,
so
great.
I've tried the Reserve, right?
Yes.
Is that the one that comes in the cool
really
packaging?
Fancy packaging, yes.
420 milligrams.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
But you mentioned Craft Reserve. So what's going on there?
And I brought a sample. I'd love to show it to you.
Well, yeah. So let's bust it out.
So this is Craft Reserve, and it's really a celebration of the artisan craftsmanship behind growing. So a good analog to that is craft beer. There's a lot of large beer manufacturers out there, but we've seen a resurgence of craft manufacturing, and it's really that story of the farmer that we're celebrating. So we have partnerships with beautiful farms in the state of Colorado, where we contract with them for their best material. We hand select it, and we start first with total plant and flower, so not trim, but plant extract. Then we preserve the terpenes. So the volatiles come off first in the extraction process, so we take care of those.
Sorry, what's a volatile?
Sorry, the volatile is that's the terpenes.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So we'll remove or separate the terpenes from the cannabis and the oil, and then we'll reintroduce it after we've purified it. So if we want the oil to be at 90%, then we can add the terpenes to that, cutting it down to, say, 80%, which is a really typical of the Craft Reserve, about 80% THC. We try not to put too much focus on the THC content, but instead the total cannabinoid content.
Yeah, it's getting up to be a popular thing. I'm starting to see more in edibles as well.
And for good reason, right? So Marinol was a drug that was isolating THC, then synthesizing it, and that was the pharmaceutical industry's approach to medicine and cannabis. Said, look, here you go. Well, what they left out were the rest of the cannabinoids, the rest of the constituents in this plant, and there's over 80 compounds, chemical compounds, that are all interacting with one another. So once you isolate and pull out one, you're really not doing the end user justice by removing most of the great stuff that's part of it. THC is the psychotropic aspect of it, but there's so much more that gives it the characteristics that we enjoy about each strain.
Oh, interesting. I love this stuff. We had a show full of weed nerds about a month ago, and it was such a blast. I asked them their favorite cannabinoid that's not THC or CBD. Me and producer Vince learned about CBG. You guys know about CBG?
Yeah.
Sounds pretty interesting. But Ralph, so explain the suite. So you have the OpenVape traditional, you have the OpenVape Reserve, and now the Craft Reserve.
That's
How
right.
do you tell people the difference?
So we wanted to have the entire spectrum for folks. So for the connoisseur, we have Craft Reserve, which touches on all things. With purity, you also have increased potency. So this is also our most potent product. It's also the tastiest. It also preserves all those characteristics of that specific strain, and it's a celebration of the best farms we can find in the state. Reserve is just solid cannabis-only oil. It's hard-hitting. It's very popular with folks. Very satisfying. And then the original, that's cut with an excipient with PEG, is very effective, and it's very inexpensive. So someone who's only has $25 in their wallet,
Mm-hmm.
they can find a product that they can afford. And someone that wants just the absolute best product on the market, well, we have something to offer them as well.
I like it. I mean, I really do believe that, and it's becoming increasingly more obvious as we, progress through this experiment, through this reality, that these gourmet aspects of cannabis, the craft aspects of cannabis, are really becoming what's next. But because we've unintentionally ended up with this couch full of cannabis, especially concentrates experts, I want to ask you each. Rye, we're coming back to you. What do each of you guys think the future of concentrated cannabis is? What are we going to be talking about 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, right? Let's start with you, man.
I mean, I think we're in the beginning stages of a lot of that now. I think it's going to be specific formulations. It's going to be things that are targeted, which will be targeted not necessarily with a cannabinoid profile. It'll be more targeted with terpenes and flavonoids and all these other constituents that Ralph's been talking about. I think that's going to be really where it's going to have to go, is people really developing true products, because what's been going on now over the last, ever since we've had a legal cannabis industry, is that people kind of process whatever they get. They take what they can get rather than crafting something with intention, finding the best things and making it repeatable, making it a true product. So I think, I don't know what it's going to be when the pharmaceutical companies and things like that eventually get involved. But for now, the level that we're producing, I think, is just going to be a continued focus towards directed products and things that are repeatable, because that's frankly the weakness of the cannabis industry, is the repeatability and the reliability of it.
Oh, interesting. I know you're a fan. Last time you were here, we talked about live resin?
Live resin.
Live resin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So do you think we're going to keep coming up with different kinds of concentrates like that? Going from wax, shatter, rosin, live resin? Are we going to have 15 more by the year's end?
I mean, probably not by the year's end. I mean, I think, there's a lot of base chemistry happening. There's only so many ways you can extract the oil that is present in the plant. So I think there's only going to be so many configurations of actual raw oil. I think that people will just continue to up the purity and the levels of things that they're able to preserve in the extract. So it won't necessarily be a brand new product. It'll just be a better, kind of progression. I think the probably biggest new product that people are talking a lot about is distillates, which are, being done with just chemistry 101 kind of stuff, in order to separate, whether you do it with a supercritical CO2 or whether you do it with ethanol distillation, you're essentially doing what Ralph talked about, is separating all the different constituents and then recombining them in different ratios. And so that allows you to, again, create a repeatable product. You can take X amount of CBD, X amount of THC, certain terpene that does this, certain flavonoid that does this, and then smush it all together. And yeah.
Fascinating. Ralph, what's your take? The future of cannabis extracts.
Well, so I'll have to agree with all of that. Isolating the constituents, so you have repeatability, and also to have a better and more efficient specific effect. That's going to be the future, where you have a product that's for a certain effect. Mm-hmm. Also, I see the future of concentrates overcoming flour as far as a preferred method of consumption, which is interesting. I mean, this is an industry.
Big words, Ralph. Way big words.
100%.
But I like it. You're dreaming.
100%. 100%.
Okay, one more. You said dream big. Right?
Yeah, dream big. Absolutely.
I see concentrates being a part of folks' daily regimen, just as a supplement. And the reason why concentrates are part of that. So you got vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C. I think we're going to see vitamin CBD and vitamin THC as well being a part of our daily regimen for our health and our well-being. And the reason why concentrates are going to satisfy that is because they're consistent, yeah, and they're dosable and then repeatable. So you can have a minute amount, a micro amount of cannabis or cannabinoids that you can enjoy and have each day. That's just part of your morning routine to take care of your health.
Fascinating. I like it. Let's estimate what year you guys think concentrates might surpass flour in terms of users or whatever. When might you guess that could happen in legal marijuana spaces?
I'm going to say 2017. It's going to be more than 50% of all consumption of cannabis.
It really is just a skyrocketing number right now, right? We're starting to get this good data from some outfits in the industry who are locked into various POS systems and shops, and I mean their data just shows incredible growth in concentrate spaces. So 2017 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. It's sooner than later. I mean, most of the clients that I work with have seen their sales go from 20% to 30% to 40%. Now they're about even, and a lot of shops, especially on the boutique end of the spectrum, are 70% concentrate. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely happening. I think in legal states, and especially in Colorado and states that have kind of had a program for a while and allow for a lot of concentrates, and when California goes, that's going to be it's automatically going to be that much of the market. So yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree. It's definitely, especially when you consider the fact that edibles are made primarily with concentrates. If you think about it that way, it's not even somebody 50%. Consuming a concentrate by vaporizing it or dabbing it or whatever. They're consuming concentrates by eating them too. So, and like Ralph said, pills and all that sort of stuff.
That's a good point. Of course, edibles, a lot of them are made with oils. Some are still made with canna butter. Is canna butter considered a concentrate? How does that work? No? What do you guys think?
I haven't heard canna butter being. I've never heard someone say that in the last 3 years.
Canna butter?
It's pretty rare, honestly, Ricardo. I mean, in the edible industry, hardly anybody uses raw cannabis flower in butter. I mean, it's just not really a thing.
I've gotten that it's rare, but didn't we have Peggy from Love's Oven? Didn't she? Was it her?
She definitely swore by it.
Yeah, Peggy and maybe Sweetgrass Kitchen. I don't know. I forget who uses canna butter, but yeah, it seems like
anybody who wasn't making candy was using canna butter. It felt like.
Yeah, it's always been a thing for baked goods. I mean, that's always been the traditional method of getting it into brownies and things like that. But I think that just because of the way the regulations are going for the edible industry, a lot of those things are just not going to be things. There's not really going to be brownies and a lot of those things coming down the road. Because they have to be stamped, they had all these variety, of different things going on. So, yeah.
Lots of fun regulations coming down the pike.
I have a question for the normalization of concentrates. Does that mean that instead of 420, we're going to start celebrating in July, or is that going to be the normal rally?
Maybe both. This 2 holidays a year sounds just right.
I mean,
I think Rye already celebrates every 7/10.
I mean, there's 2 a day, also. So I mean, yeah.
Good question, Vince. And gentlemen, it's time for the pot quiz. All right. We have some current events question from the cannabis space. Some of these stories have appeared daily on thecannabist.co. Rye, we're starting with you, and this is how it works. If he misses the question, you can steal the point, vice versa. So, Rye, what popular sweetened spread now has a cannabis-infused imitator, thanks to a Canada cannabis company?
If I'm thinking about the things I like to eat when I'm high and things like that, I would probably guess Nutella. Is that so?
Dang, nice, man. Yeah, have you guys seen these pictures of, I think they're calling it Crontella. The Canadian.
Danktella has such a nice
I think there's better names in there than Crontella.
Maybe we'll give them a call after the show. Some pointers.
Yeah, you could give them a lot of pointers, because right now this company is going through that awkward stage in semi-legal product where they're just imitating all the legal products, including with their logos. So I'm sure they have some interesting lawsuits on their way, including a Jif peanut butter ripoff and a Nutella ripoff. But you got the point. And Ralph, this one's for you.
All right.
Marijuana advocate Shauna Banda is suing her home state after authorities removed her 11-year-old son from her home after he spoke up at school about his mom's cannabis use. Name the state.
I know the story. I don't know the state.
Yeah. Very sad story. Do you want to take a guess?
Utah.
Good guess. Good guess. Throw it to Rye for the possible steal.
Kansas, I believe.
Ah, it is Kansas. Nice. Okay, nice. Yeah, I almost said Colorado neighboring state. I'm like, oh, we don't have that many
on the
of
other
them.
side. Yeah.
But yeah, that's right now she's suing the state of Kansas and some of their regulatory agencies. Very sad story. Rye. The city of Denver last week said it is changing the way it polices the cannabis industry by halting one of its procedures used to detect the presence of banned pesticides. What was that procedure?
I believe it was the analytical testing.
Yes, lab testing. That is it. Yeah. So they are now no longer testing any of the products in labs, in a private lab especially. I think part of this helps that a majority of these recalls are now being done on a state level, not the city level, and but that's where they were going. They said it was never a long-term solution, so they're moving away from it. Good work. You guys are doing well, right? Holy
Nice job.
Ralph, for the last question of the show. Of course, Colorado was declared to be the most 420-friendly state in the union, according to a recent analysis. But what state came in second?
Man, I would have to.
And I will say, what Pacific Northwest state came in second?
I mean,
I would have to say the other state that's also legalizing marijuana and selling legal marijuana is at Washington State.
It is Washington, but Oregon was a close third, so well done. All right, so you didn't goose them. You didn't goose egg them. It wasn't a total shutout. You guys, thank you so much for coming on. I want to say thanks to our guests, Prichard of the Cannabist and Ralph Morgan with OpenVape. Thanks to you all for watching, listening to the podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. It's very easy. Hit that button. I am Ricardo Baca, joined by producers Vince, Eric, Katie, and the rest of the crew. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next week.
I'm allowed to lose, I choose to win. I'm all in, I'm calling any posse you'll be raising at the end. I say it again, ain't afraid to get in. I be going for the jackpot with aces in my hand, I'm raw.